Hey guys, it's Jason. Welcome back for today's video. Now, recently when I covered my top 5 favorite chest exercises, I promised you guys that I'd fill you in on the keys to executing them. I mean, after all, that's probably even more important. Now, if you haven't seen that video yet, the link is in the description below. Go check it out after you watch this video all the way through to the end. When you're watching this video, I'd actually recommend that you take a few notes here on the way through, or pause at various intervals and think about the keys that I'm going to walk you through until you're at the end. And once you've seen the full video here, you will automatically now have a giant advantage over most other people in your gym for how to grow your chest. Basic principles. So if you want your chest or any other muscle to grow, you really have to challenge the normal function of that muscle while generating as much tension as you can throughout the range of motion that you're going to perform, using, in this case, as many pec muscle fibers as you possibly can. So let's first take a closer look at what the pec major muscle actually looks like. It is a pretty large fan-shaped muscle which basically originates on the sternum or breastbone in the center of your chest and along your upper ribs. The upper fibers or clavicular fibers of the pec major originates right here on the front surface of your collarbone. And all these fibers eventually dovetail and meet in a tendon that inserts into a groove on the upper surface of your humerus or upper arm bone. Now, when we train chest, we're typically performing fly movements or pressing movements. And what these movements are in effect doing is taking advantage of the main function of the pec major, which is to horizontally adduct the upper arm, or simplistically, bring your upper arm across your body and inwards towards the midline of the body. Really, you can think about just bringing your bicep inward towards the side of your pec, and you want to forcefully perform that movement. Even though the muscle performs a variety of other more minor movement functions, we're really just going to focus in this video on the horizontal adduction. And now, probably the most important point of all, the first point, before I even start training chest, I want to mentally tap into the position of my shoulder blades, because I know that being able to keep them retracted or pulled back and pulled together and depressed or pulled downward toward my hips are going to impact how much force I can generate with my pecs. And so I practice these scapular positions while just on their own, as well as while moving my arm through a pec fly motion, driving that upper arm bicep area inward to the side of my pec, since that's essentially the movement I'm going to be focusing on while going through some pec exercises. Now, once I'm ready to start an exercise, I get set up either on the bench that I'm using, or if I'm standing for a cable flyer, for example, I first pull my shoulder blades back, pull them down, and really focusing on locking my shoulder girdle in place in that position so that I can be as stable as possible at my shoulder joints. I know this is going to help me to generate as much tension as my pec possibly can, and I also know it's going to reduce my risk for injury, which as we get older is something we tend to pay more and more attention to. So once I'm there, I tend to also make sure that my core is braced in order to stabilize my spine, hip, and my trunk. And then once that's taken care of, here are the tips. Here are the master tips. I'm going to explain them to you in one single rep. Once I'm stable and set up, I usually start with the negative or the eccentric portion of the movement. So that's starting a press from the top or a fly from the middle position. And throughout the negative or eccentric, I'm focusing on really remaining in control as my pecs are lengthening with my arms moving in that outward arc. Now, I do this not only to control the weight that I'm using and prevent it from pulling me into a place that I cannot control, and I'll talk more about it in a second, but I'm also doing this because I know that there is so much more muscle building opportunity during the negative of a rep where the pec is generating massive amounts of tension while lengthening, and I want to take full advantage of that. I'm also pretty slow and deliberate on the negative as I'm really forcefully contracting my pecs. And as an extra bonus, I also think about using my rear delts to pull my arms outward in this arc, and that's going to provide me even more resistance for my pecs to contract against, so more tension, more growth. Super importantly, I'm aware of the range that I can move through on the negative and still be in control using these muscles here, using my pecs as the target. And this is commonly known as remaining within the active range of motion for a muscle. Now, the minute you go beyond the active range or the range that you can control with your pecs, and usually that happens when you're pulled into a position by a very heavy weight, you're going to be putting increased tension and stress on the tendons and the ligaments and other assistive muscles. And what muscle? Well, usually for a pressing movement, that's going to be the anterior delt or the front delt. And you're using those structures now to bring you out of that uncontrolled position before you can then again concentrate and generate tension in your pecs to do the work. That's where you're going to get into danger. In the worst case scenario, you're going to strain a ligament, or you're going to tear your pec tendon, maybe even a full muscle tear of your pec. But the best case scenario is by transferring the tension away from your pecs, you're just not going to get the benefit of the exercise that you're after. So stay within your active range. One thing I would mention as well is be especially careful of being pulled outside of your active range on barbell pressing movements, particularly that flat barbell bench press. Now, once I'm at the end of my active range of motion, I come to a complete stop because I want to minimize that impact on my shoulder joint. And I know as well that when you bounce out of the negative, what you're doing is using that elastic energy that's built up in the pec tendon to start the pressing or the flying concentric portion. I don't want that. I want the whole movement to be controlled entirely by muscle tension and not by soft tissue at all. And then I focus on contracting my pecs just for a split second without even moving. And then I start the inward arc of my upper arms on the concentric portion of the press or the fly, while simultaneously pushing my shoulder blades back into the bench if I'm using a bench. Now, most of the way through that concentric portion, I'm really struggling, really trying to maintain scapular retraction and depression as much as I possibly can, until I approach a point where, and this usually occurs on flies, I'm just not able to do so anymore. At that point, I allow a slight scapular protraction with my shoulder blades gliding out and around my rib cage. For some people, it might help to visualize not only your elbows moving in that upward-inward arc, but also to visualize the pec muscle itself shortening as you drive your arms in and across your body. And I tend to end with the dumbbells just outside of shoulder width apart at the top of the movement. Now, I know that by doing this, I might miss out on a couple millimeters of muscle shortening, but I also know that's going to help me to maintain tension in my pecs throughout the entire set. Once you're maintaining dumbbells, if you're using free weights, outside of shoulder width apart, some of that work is being done by your pecs, and so the tension remains where you want it to be. So that's it, guys. I have taken you through what I typically do before starting a chest training session. I have taken you through, the activation movements. I've taken you through what I'm really crazily focused on every step of the way through every single rep. And, my goal is to try to get that perfect movement within the first 1 or 2 reps. Really, as I practice, the goal is to get that perfect rep right from the start of every exercise. And, that comes with practice. I would encourage you guys, of course, to practice these tips, put these into practice on your next chest day. Let me know what you think. I would take it a step further and say, keep practicing them. And I challenge you to not notice a difference in the degree of muscular tension you're able to generate with your pecs. One step further, I would challenge you to not notice a difference in how quickly your pecs fatigue on your next training session, and probably even the DOMS or the muscle soreness that you experience afterwards. And eventually, I challenge you, if you are really diligent with putting these things into practice every single chest training session for the next 6 months or so, assuming you're training consistently, to not notice the difference in your overall pec development. So let me know that you found the video to be beneficial by giving it a thumbs up. I'd encourage you to share the video with a friend. Guaranteed you have a lifting partner or a friend who could benefit from integrating these tips into their own chest training session. Definitely, of course, subscribe, show the channel some love, keep it going. More videos to come as always. There are definitely a few totally different topics coming up, so you really want to receive those alerts. Until next time, guys, aloha from beautiful Kauai.